What is up, guys? It is Strider coming at you with some more Pokemon content. Today we are going to continue our series in trying to improve at the draft portion of Pokemon League Draft format. So we have talked a lot about different roles across many of my videos. You've probably heard me say the word Stealth Rock Setter. You've probably heard me say the word Spinner, maybe Wall. You've heard some of these terms. Some of you may know a lot of them. Some of you may know none of them. I don't know. But today we're going to go over many different roles Pokemon can have. There are roles that we are not going to mention that just aren't kind of listed in this video, mainly because they are so situational. I don't think they are worth mentioning or at all necessary on a roster. Also, when we're done talking about a role, I will go ahead and point out an example of a Tier 1 Pokemon who is capable of filling that role. Part of what we will discuss also is how critical they are to having on your roster. Some of these roles are critical enough that you probably want more than one on your 11-man roster. You know, you might want to back up. And some of these are not even necessary really at all. Over here on the left, you'll see I have a document titled Draft Checklist. Basically, each time you draft a Pokemon capable of filling the role, you check a box associated with it. So if you draft a Stealth Rock Setter, you'll check that box right there. A Pokemon can and many will fill more than one role. So there are, so with one Pokemon pick, you could check multiple boxes at once. You know, you could check a Stealth Rock Setter and a Physical Wall and a Hazard Removal all at the same time. You know, with one pick. I will make this document public before I even put this video up, and I'll put a link in the description. Also, if you are in my draft, I will pass these out if you want one. This is really meant as a guideline. You do not have to follow this to a T. In fact, most rosters probably will not check all of these boxes, but this is really here to give you just some direction. I find just a little bit of structure in something as wide open as like a Pokemon draft can really kind of help get your bearings. So let's just kind of jump right in and we'll take it right from the top. The very first thing here I have is a Stealth Rock Setter. You'll notice I have it says 2 minimum. We'll kind of get into that. Stealth Rock Setters are pretty essential to most teams. While you never really want to bring a team of 6 with more than one Stealth Rocker, I would say in league play you probably want to bring a Rock Setter in 80 to 90% of games. It's probably a little closer to 90. If you don't remember what Stealth Rocks are, they are a move that when you cast it, it does no damage. But what it does do is it puts rocks on your opponent's side of the field, and they just stay there. And so every time one of their Pokemon switches in, they take 1/8 of their health. It is a rock type move, and it does take into effect weaknesses and strengths. So, for example, if you have something that is weak to rock, like let's say fire, they will take extra damage from Stealth Rocks. I would recommend having at least 2 Stealth Rock Setters on your 11-man roster. Since rocks is something you want to bring the vast majority of the time, having 0 Stealth Rockers is just really not an option. And only having 1 rocker can really put a lot of restrictions on your team building options. So 2 is the bare minimum I would draft. One excellent example of a Stealth Rock Setter actually is Landorus Therian. Right there, Landorus T, as you will often hear him referenced as. He has a lot of natural bulk, especially with Intimidate. His typing is great. He only has 2 weaknesses. He has 3 resistances, 2 immunities, and just kind of on top of all that, he has like a superb attack stat. Just a great Pokemon all around. Just kind of, he's a good example of a Stealth Rock Setter, but he's one of the best Tier 1 Pokemon in my opinion, bar none. He's very flexible. We've talked about that in previous drafts. Just a good Pokemon. So again, Stealth Rock Setter right here. So Hazard Removal. Hazard Removal is another incredibly important role to have on your roster. For those of you that do not know, hazards are Stealth Rocks, as well as there's some others we'll get into later, but those are spikes, toxic spikes, and sticky webs. But again, I have those down the line here. And when I say Hazard Removal, what I'm talking about is the move Rapid Spin, the move Defog, or the ability Magic Bounce. and we'll kind of just go through those real quick. So Rapid Spin is a normal type move that removes all hazards on your side of the field and does a little bit of damage. The damage is minimal. And when I say your side of the field, I mean, so like if your opponent sets up Stealth Rocks and you set up Stealth Rocks on their side, so they have Stealth Rocks set up on you, you have Stealth Rocks set up on them. If you use Rapid Spin, it will get rid of the rocks on your side. It will not touch the opponent's side. Defog is a flying type move that removes all hazards. So it would also remove the hazards your opponent has. So in that way, Rapid Spin kind of has a little bit of an advantage over Defog. Defog does have another advantage that, again, we'll get into later. Magic Bounce is an ability, like I said, not a move. It is an ability that basically, if you have a Magic Bounce route and they try to set up Stealth Rocks, what will happen is they will just bounce right back to their side. Instead of setting up on your side, they will just bounce right back to them. Same with spikes, toxic spikes, and other ones. And there's also some status moves, so that's important to know, but kind of irrelevant for this particular conversation. Again, I recommend, much like a Stealth Rock setter, I recommend a minimum of 2 hazard removals. Because much like Stealth Rock setters, you will want a way to remove hazards most of the time. So again, just kind of, having 0 is just kind of not an option on your full roster. And only 1 puts, again, a lot of restriction on your team building options. Again, like Stealth Rocks, you don't really want to double up on hazard removal, though. You kind of just want 1 per 6-man team. Again, when I say 2 minimum, I don't mean 2 on 1 6-man team like you would bring 2, but I do mean 2 on your full 11-man roster to give you some versatility there. Let's see, a good example, actually one of the best, probably the best Rapid Spinner in the entire game, is Excadrill. Excadrill is a great Tier 1 Rapid Spinner. He may be, like I said, the best Rapid Spinner in the game. He synergizes great, just a quick note, he synergizes great with dragons, actually, as pretty much a lot of the dragons resist or are immune to most or all of his weaknesses. Also, with his ground and steel typing, he can threaten the fairies and steels that can wall dragons effectively. So again, moving on to physical threat and special threat. I'm kind of dumping these into one, mainly because they're 2 sides of the same coin. They do the same thing, except one hits from the physical side, one hits from the special side. So again, physical threat basically just means a physical damage dealer, and special threat means a special damage dealer. The goal of Pokemon, obviously, is to kill all 6 of your opponent's mons. Things that deal a lot of damage are very good at that, so it's a fairly straightforward role and thing to understand. These are on the checklist essentially to make sure you diversify your threats. If you only have physical threats, for example, and your opponent now knows it doesn't need to bring a special wall, it can dedicate everything to the physical side of defense. Oftentimes, just having 2 minimum will go a long way of each to just kind of keep your threats diverse and make it a lot harder for your opponent to predict what sets you're going to bring. In some ways, threat can actually be broken down kind of into 2 roles. I don't have them broken out here on the list because I think you'll probably just naturally pick a decent amount of both. But anyways, so like I said, two different kind of roles here. We have wall breakers and we have sweepers. Wall breakers are usually a little bit slower, but with better bulk and usually like a really high attack / special attack stat or some ability or move that just really helps it break down walls. They have the potential to just blow huge holes in teams. Sweepers are genuinely kind of in contrast to wall breakers, just very fast with good attacking stats. Usually they're on the frail side. These are often very good at kind of cleaning up the end of battles when everything has been whittled down a little bit, like towards the end of the game when everything's at like 60% or something health or something like that. They just kind of can come in and they're fast enough to outspeed everything and just kill everything, just knock them all down to end the game. Before we move on to examples real quick of these threats, I did just want to mention mixed threats, which are mons that can run both physical and special sets, or on some occasions both at the same time. These are very difficult for your opponent to prepare for because they just have no idea what walls it going into a match. A few quick examples are Infernape, Victini, and Salamence. I don't really want to get into them, but I just wanted to bring up a couple examples there. An example of a special threat, a really good one actually, is Keldeo. He has great and unique offensive typing. I think there's only like one other mon that has water fighting typing, and he has some decent coverage options. Really, though, the strength of him is just not a lot of Pokemon, just both of his stabs, which leaves the opponent which leaves your opponent with very few actual switch-ins. He is fast. He has high special attack. Just kind of a very standard special sweeper. His biggest weakness probably is just that his move pool is a little bit limited. But again, with his 2 stabs, you almost don't even care. And that's an example of a special sweeper. We're also going to talk about a physical wall breaker here, mostly physical at least. Kyurem Black, or Kyurem B, which you may have heard him referred to as, is just an absolutely terrifying wall breaker. It has insanely high attack stat and very good special attack. It has middling speed, which is kind of just the thing that keeps this thing in check. But again, if you're just looking for something to just absolutely just hit something as hard as you can, Kyurem Black's a pretty good choice. So again, just to reiterate here, 2 minimum of each will keep you diverse enough that you're not going to get walled completely by one side of the spectrum here. And so as we've been talking about, the antithesis of a threat kind of is a wall. These mons are designed to take hits. Like threats, we are also kind of going to lump these together because they are, again, 2 sides of the same coin. Special walls take special hits, physical walls take physical hits. Oftentimes these mons are so good at their job that even super effective moves won't even bother them that much, especially from a Pokemon maybe not super heavily invested on the offensive side or like a non-stab move or something. Note this actual section on the document, unlike the ones we've seen before, says 2 and not 2 minimum. That is intentional. I believe you want about 2 of each. That number can vary, but 2 of each should give you a reasonable number of answers to your opponent's threats without making your teams too passive. Having a team that is too passive kind of presents its own unique issues, but that's kind of too long and slightly out of scope for what I want this video to be. Some examples of walls here. A great physical wall is Hippowdon. Hippowdon is just really one of the premier physical walls in the format. I think it's top 1 or 2, bar none. He has access to reliable recovery in the move Slack Off. He has very good defenses and HP stats. He stacks up damage, just kind of residual damage from his ability, Sandstream. And he actually has kind of a surprisingly good offensive move pool and stat in order to make sure he's not entirely passive. Like, he can actually threaten some things and get them out of there. Moving on to Special Wall. A good example of Special Wall is Zapdos. Zapdos is a pretty good example of a Special Wall. He also has reliable recovery in the move Roost. His typing is very good. He only has 2 weaknesses. And again, like Hippowdon, he's not so passive that your opponent can just kind of set up in his face. He has a pretty good special attack stat and some decent move options that really allow him to hit pretty hard. The next section here of this checklist over here is U-turn and Volt Switch. This is kind of a package deal, as I think having a Volt Turn core, we've talked about Volt Turn core, is something that most rosters will find use for little opportunity cost. Like, I don't think you're going to have to put a huge priority on this. I think it might just kind of, you might want to push for it a little bit, but I think it's going to happen for you. After one of each, though, I really wouldn't prioritize Mons with either of these moves. If you don't know, basically U-turn is a physical bug type move that switches you out after you deal damage. This is great for capturing momentum. Volt Switch is similar. It is a special electric type move that switches your mon out after it deals damage. Having both on a single team kind of leads to quote-unquote a mobile team is kind of what I like to call it. You just hit and you get out, and you hit and you get out, and you oftentimes find yourself you're the one with all of the, I don't know, you just have all of the initiative and getting to get your threats out there. And you'll just find yourself in a lot of situations where you just have momentum if you use your Volt Turn core effectively. This is the only section of the document, too, where I kind of don't or would not recommend checking both of these boxes with the same mon, even if you come up with a mon that does learn both. The point here is kind of to have one of each to get that Volt Turn core going, like I've talked about. let's see, examples. A great example, actually, of a volt switcher, at least, is Raikou. He's a very powerful special sweeper with stab volt switch. His move pool is a little bit limited, but his very good speed and special attack helps him mitigate that somewhat. And since he has such a good speed stat and he's a little frail, volt switch allows him to, volt switch on that thing that he wants to switch out of anyways, and then, just kind of get out of that sticky situation. One of the better U-turners in the format actually is Phazer, or Hazer, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Hazer boasts a stab U-turn off a very impressive attack stat. His typing and respectable defensive stats make him relatively difficult to take down. His slow speed and access to U-turn allows him to take the hit for since he's kind of so difficult to take down, he's kind of the opposite of Raikou. He wants to take the hit for something, right? So he takes the hit, U-turns out, gets out, and then he gives one of his frailer teammates, maybe like an offensive threat that can threaten whatever's out on your opponent's side, kind of a free switch in. Next on the list here, again about one of each on those that volt turn core. Next on the list here is additional hazard setters. Additional hazard setters are kind of the first of what I'm calling luxury roles. I do not think these are necessary on your roster, nor would I really prioritize it if you just kind of can't. The three types of additional hazards we're going to talk about really are spikes, toxic spikes, and sticky webs. These are kind of all similar to rocks in that they do nothing when cast, but when opponents' mons switch in, they have a negative effect. Towards them. Spikes and toxic spikes actually allow multiple layers of themselves to be set down. Spikes actually allows up to 3 layers, meaning you can cast it 3 times. Spikes do 1/8 damage at 1 layer on the switch, 1/6 at 2 layers, and 1/4, so 1/4 of their health at 3 layers. Toxic spikes allow 2 layers basically, and they poison the target at 1 layer, and badly poison. And poison is just kind of like we tick down a little bit. Badly poison is it actually gets worse and worse every turn they're in. Sticky webs is a little different than other hazards in that it doesn't really do damage on switch-ins, but what it does do is it slows their switches. Or anything that switches in actually loses 50% of its speed. These are not really as important. None of these are important. I mean, I'm not just talking about sticky webs. These are not as important as stealth rocks, mainly because stealth rock actually hits anything that switches in, whereas anything with flying or levitate is actually immune to the other 3 hazards. And steel types also have the added benefit of they're immune to poison, so they don't get poisoned. So again, toxic spikes just don't do anything. And poison types, actually, if you have a poison type and you switch in a toxic spike, they actually just absorb the toxic spikes, which just gets rid of them. So again, those just aren't really as important. Spikes and toxic spikes are kind of great actually on like bulky teams that just want to stack hazards and prolong the game as long as possible by just switching encounters for people's threats and making them switch out and just keep this long, prolonged game going on. And sticky webs kind of, I find at least, are great against offensive teams since it can really hinder their sweeping ability. Like they don't have that ability to just come in and just kind of wreck a team because you can switch in something maybe a little bulky or even something that just like, or oftentimes they'll switch in, get that speed drop, and now whatever you have outspeeds it anyways. So maybe it really hinders the offensive teams. So again, this may or may not kind of fit on your roster, but having access to a mon or two with access to these moves can be nice. The only mon actually that I can think of that is a tier 1 mon that does have these additional hazards setting capabilities is Skarmory. Skarmory is really right up there in terms of physical walls, right up there with Hippowdon in my opinion. And the great thing about him with laying spikes is he has the bulk to be able to kind of lay down multiple layers without actually, getting knocked out. So it kind of synergizes well with him. So that's a pretty good example. And again, 0 to 1 there, not necessary. The rest of these are all, like I said, luxury rolls. So moving on, we're going to talk about a spin blocker. Spin blockers, again, are just another luxury roll. A spin blocker blocks the opponents basically from using rapid spin. Since rapid spin is a normal type move, ghosts are actually immune to it. This means that if a mon attempts to rapid spin with a ghost out, it doesn't do anything. Hazards stay out on the field and it doesn't do any damage. So this is kind of the advantage I was talking about earlier that defog actually has over rapid spin. Nothing is immune to flying, so barring the user of defog dying before it has a chance to clear away the hazards, it is going to clear away those hazards. So basically a spin blocker, to sum it all up, is just a ghost type. That's all that means. Again, this is a luxury role, but it can come in handy if your opponent's only way of removing hazards is with the actual move rapid spin. The only tier 1 ghost is Gengar, so it kind of wins by default. He does make a decent spin blocker though, because there's a good chance he outspeeds the rapid spinner, in play. And he has a super high special attack stat, so he can often force a switch by your opponent anyways. The last role here we're going to talk about are Hazer / Phazer. Again, luxury role, but Haze is a move that resets all stat boosts and drops. It is very good at stopping like a sweep that your opponent is trying to set up. For example, if he has a Dragon Dance or 2 up on, say, something like a Dragonite, this just kind of resets all that work that they did. Phazer means actually pseudo Hazer, so P Hazer, and it refers to something with a move that literally forces a switch. So moves like Roar, Whirlwind, and Dragon Tail force the opponent Mon out, which in turn, by default just stops all those stat boosts anyways. The last slot, and also one I would consider luxury, simply because you don't want to bring Whirlwind, Roar, or Haze all that often, even on mons that learn it. And B, Roar is actually kind of widespread enough that you may not have to prioritize it in the draft and just kind of end up with a couple on accident. So again, a good example of a Phazer / Hazer in tier 1 is Heatran. It learns Roar. It has pretty good bulk, actually very good bulk, and its typing is good. He can often take hits from powerful mons who have already set up, and just still be standing after he phases them out. That is it, guys. Again, I will pass this out and make this public. I hope you did enjoy this video. Yeah, that's it. Have a good one, guys, and I don't know, maybe go play Pokemon Go or something. See you later.